My son Bradley held Margaret's pearl necklace up to the morning light. $20, he told the woman reaching for it. I stood in my own driveway. My son was selling 40 years of my life from folding tables. A stranger pawing through my wife's things hesitated, glancing at me. Don't mind him, Bradley's voice carried across the driveway. Dad has dementia. He doesn't know what he's saying. I said nothing. I watched him open Margaret's mahogany jewelry box. His hand froze over the velvet lining. If this story hooks you, hit subscribe and tell me your country in the comments. It means the world to me. My name is Harold Whitmore. I'm 63 years old, and I spent 35 years at Ford's Rouge plant learning to spot what didn't belong. That skill kept me employed through 3 recessions, 2 plant restructurings, and a management culture that rotated faster than the assembly line bolts. I started at 20, fresh out of trade school, working the line alongside men twice my age who'd been there since the plant opened. By the time I retired 8 years ago, I'd risen to senior quality control manager. Every defect I caught saved the company money. Every pattern I identified prevented recalls. Every serial number I logged created accountability. The job shaped everything about me. The way I think, the way I document, the way I notice when something doesn't fit. Margaret used to joke that I treated our marriage like a quality inspection. She wasn't wrong. I kept records of everything. Purchase receipts filed by year. Warranty information cross-referenced with product serial numbers. 17 pocket-sized Moleskine notebooks filled since 1978, each one containing the provenance of every significant item I owned. I met Margaret at a church social in the summer of 1982. She wore a blue dress with white flowers and laughed at something the pastor said. I stood by the punch bowl, 22 years old, and knew within 5 minutes that I would marry her. 6 months later, I did. We built our Dearborn Colonial brick by brick. Not literally, though I did most of the finish work myself. The house took 42 years of mortgage payments, weekend repairs, and the kind of stubborn commitment that young people don't understand anymore. 4 bedrooms. Detached 2-car garage. A backyard where I taught Bradley to throw a baseball when he was 7, his small hands struggling to grip the leather. Bradley. My son. Margaret saw it first. She always did. Our boy had an entitled streak that showed early. He expected things handed to him. Christmas presents opened with barely a thank you before he asked what else there was. Chores assigned and forgotten within hours. Promises made and broken without apparent guilt. She warned me. We'd lie in bed at night, the house quiet, and she'd whisper her concerns. He takes without giving, Harold. He thinks the world owes him something. I believed hard work would eventually take root. I believed my example would matter. I believed the private school tuition, the down payment on his first house, the $50,000 in startup capital for his real estate business would teach him what sacrifice looked like. It never did. 8 months ago, Margaret died of pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis came in February. She was gone by April. 61 years old, and the woman who'd shared my bed for 41 years simply stopped breathing while I held her hand in a hospice room that smelled of antiseptic and flowers past their prime. She tried to tell me something at the end. Her voice was thin, barely a whisper through the morphine haze. Something about the jewelry box. Her mahogany jewelry box with the brass hinges, the one that had sat on her nightstand since before Bradley was born. I leaned close, my ear near her lips, but the words came out fragmented. Box. Hidden. Evidence. Then she was gone. I've replayed that moment 1,000 times. Lying awake at 3 a.m. in our bed that feels too large now. Eating breakfast alone at the kitchen table where we shared 40 years of morning coffee. Winding my vintage Timex watch each morning, the same ritual I performed while she brushed her teeth beside me. The house is too quiet, too empty. Margaret's floral wallpaper still lines the kitchen. Her china cabinet still holds the dishes her mother passed down. The spot on her nightstand where the jewelry box sat for 4 decades still shows a faint rectangle in the dust, even though I moved the box to storage weeks ago. I couldn't keep looking at it. Couldn't keep seeing it every morning and remembering her fingers lifting the lid to retrieve her pearl necklace. The necklace I gave her for our 17th anniversary. Rosenthal Jewelers in downtown Detroit. Certificate of Authenticity, number RJ 1999, W07. $3,400 in 1999. Appraised at $4,200 2 years ago. I remember every detail because I recorded it. Provenance Journal number 12, page 47. Purchase date, vendor, serial numbers, appraisal documentation. The habit started at Ford. Every bolt counted, every serial number logged, every discrepancy investigated. After Margaret died, I moved her most valuable things to Secure Store Unit 247 on Michigan Avenue. Climate-controlled, 24-hour security, electronic access logs. Her antique furniture from her grandmother. The jewelry collection she'd assembled over 4 decades. Boxes of family photographs spanning our entire marriage. I couldn't bear to see these things every day, but I couldn't part with them either. The storage unit became a preservation of our life together. Locked away. Safe. Or so I believed. After Margaret's funeral, Bradley started visiting more frequently. He'd drive over from his West Bloomfield house, that 4,000-square-foot McMansion he and his wife Kirsten bought at the peak of the market. He'd sit in my living room with his real estate agent smile, asking about my health, my appetite, my state of mind. I took it as grief-driven closeness. A son reconnecting with his father after losing his mother. I wanted to believe that. But the visits always included requests. Dad, I thought I could help organize some of Mom's things at the storage unit. Get everything cataloged for you. I gave him access. He was my son. Dad, I was looking at the house deed. Just wondering about the estate situation. You know, for planning purposes. I showed him the documents. He was my son. Dad, have you thought about somewhere smaller? A condo, maybe. Less maintenance. Closer to us. In West Bloomfield. I told him I'd think about it. He was my son. The suggestions came with practiced concern. Bradley leaned forward, hands open, the same posture I'd seen him use with hesitant buyers. Are you eating enough, Dad? You look tired. Maybe you should see someone about the grief. I chose not to examine it too closely. The alternative was accepting that my son viewed his mother's death as an opportunity. Dolores Finch saw what I refused to see. Dolores was Margaret's best friend. 71 years old, sharp-tongued, and she'd lived next door to us for 30 years. She'd held Margaret's hand through 2 miscarriages before Bradley finally came. She brought casseroles during my knee surgery and checked on Margaret daily during the cancer treatment. At the funeral, Dolores pulled me aside. Dolores gripped my arm. 71 years old and still stronger than she looked. I promised Margaret I'd watch over you, she said. Her eyes were red but steady. I intend to keep that promise. I nodded, not understanding what she meant. 3 weeks ago, Dolores saw something that troubled her. She told me about it yesterday, her voice careful, like she was afraid of breaking something. It was a Tuesday morning. Around 7. I was at my usual breakfast with Russell Pratt at Lakeside Diner, the same corner booth we'd occupied every Tuesday for 20 years. Russell is 71, retired county sheriff, and he's the only person besides Margaret who's ever beaten me at chess. While I was eating eggs over medium and discussing the Tigers' dismal season, Bradley's BMW pulled into my driveway. Dolores watched from her kitchen window. Bradley and his wife Kirsten got out. They moved quickly to my garage, used the side door code I'd given Bradley for emergencies, and spent 40 minutes loading boxes into their car. Dolores said they worked without speaking. Efficient. Practiced. Like they'd done it before. She assumed it was legitimate. Maybe I'd asked them to take some of Margaret's things. Maybe they were helping me clear out the garage. She said nothing, but something about their manner stayed with her. The way Kirsten kept glancing at the street. The way Bradley checked his phone repeatedly, as if timing something. I listened to Dolores's account without interrupting. When she finished, I thanked her calmly and walked back to my house. That night, I opened the drawer in my study where I keep important keys. Top drawer, right side, same location for 40 years. The storage unit key should have been there, resting in the small wooden tray Margaret bought me at a craft fair in 1991. The tray was empty. I searched methodically. Every drawer in the desk. Every pocket of every jacket in my closet. The kitchen junk drawer. The nightstand on Margaret's side of the bed, which I still can't bring myself to use. I checked every logical location, then the illogical ones. 35 years of quality control had taught me that items don't simply disappear. There's always a cause. Always an explanation. Always a paper trail. I called Secure Store the next morning. The manager, a woman named Patricia who'd helped me set up the unit, answered on the third ring. I reported the missing key. I asked about recent access. I expected her to tell me the unit hadn't been touched since my last visit in September. She pulled up the records, typed something on her keyboard, paused. Mr. Whitmore, she said slowly, someone accessed Unit 247 yesterday at 2:47 p.m. The duplicate key was used. I was at my cardiology appointment at 2:47 p.m. yesterday. Dr. Reeves had me on the treadmill for a stress test while someone else walked into my storage unit. I asked about the access log history. Patricia's voice grew more concerned as she scrolled through the records. There have been weekly visits for the past 3 months, she said. Every Tuesday and Thursday. Always during business hours. I did the math silently. Tuesday mornings, I'm at Lakeside Diner with Russell. Thursday afternoons, I do my grocery shopping at the Kroger on Michigan Avenue. Same schedule for years. Anyone watching me would know exactly when I'd be unavailable. The pattern was too precise to be coincidence. I asked who had obtained the duplicate key. Patricia checked the records. Bradley Whitmore, she confirmed. He requested it 2 months ago. Said he was helping his father organize the unit contents. A cold weight settled in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. The same clarity I had at Ford when a pattern emerged from scattered defects. A flaw in the process itself. I thanked Patricia calmly. My voice didn't waver. 35 years of professional discipline keeps certain things in check. I hung up the phone and sat in my study chair. The empty drawer remained open, that small wooden tray where the key should have rested now, just another piece of evidence. I pulled Provenance Journal number 17 from its spot on my shelf, turned past the recent entries documenting Margaret's funeral arrangements, the bills I'd paid, the small daily purchases that constitute a life. Found a blank page near the middle. I wrote the date in my careful handwriting. Below it, I added a new section header, the same protocol I'd used for documenting defects on the line. Evidence. Then I began documenting the missing key, the access log times, the correlation with my medical appointments, the duplicate key Bradley obtained under false pretenses. Every detail recorded the same way I'd documented defects for 3 decades. My son had been stealing from me, systematically, for months, timing his visits to coincide with my absences, using the trust I'd given him as a weapon. I thought about Margaret's final words. Box. Hidden. Evidence. I thought about the jewelry box I'd moved to storage. The mahogany box with brass hinges that had sat on her nightstand for 41 years. I thought about my son's practiced concern, his questions about the house deed, his suggestions about somewhere smaller. The Timex watch on my wrist ticked steadily. Margaret had given it to me for our 20th anniversary. 23 years. It had kept perfect time. 23 years of small daily rituals, of winding the mechanism each morning, of checking it against the clock on the wall. Some things endure. Some things keep their value. And some things, when examined closely, reveal defects that can't be repaired. I closed the journal and returned it to its shelf. Tomorrow, I would call Russell. Not for breakfast, but for advice. He'd spent 25 years as a county sheriff. He knew how investigations worked. He knew the difference between suspicion and proof. I had suspicion now, but I would need proof. The house settled around me, creaking the way old houses do. Margaret's chair sat empty across the room. Her photograph on the mantel showed her at 57, laughing at a summer barbecue 3 years before the diagnosis. Silver hair catching the sunlight. I didn't speak to the photograph. I wasn't ready for that yet. Instead, I wound my watch one extra click and listened to the mechanism engage. 35 years on the line had taught me patience. Quality control wasn't about speed. It was about systematic examination, careful documentation, building a case one verified fact at a time. My son thought I was too old to notice, too grief-stricken to pay attention, too confused to connect the patterns. He'd forgotten I spent 35 years finding defects. Finding his would be easier. Looking back now, I can trace exactly when the pattern began. 6 months ago, 3 weeks after Margaret's burial. Bradley called on a Thursday evening. His voice carried that real estate warmth he perfected over 15 years of selling houses to people who couldn't afford them. "Dad, Kirsten and I want you to come for Sunday dinner. Just family. We're worried about you rattling around that big house alone." I accepted. What father wouldn't? My son wanted to see me. My grandson would be there. Margaret would have wanted me to stay connected to family, especially now. I drove to West Bloomfield that Sunday afternoon, taking Telegraph Road past the strip malls and gas stations, watching the neighborhoods shift from working-class Dearborn to the manicured lawns of Oakland County. Bradley's house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac. 4,000 square feet of financed furniture and a swimming pool they'd used maybe twice since installation. The McMansion. Margaret had grown up in a 3-bedroom ranch in Westland, and she never understood why anyone needed a formal living room, a great room, and a family room, all in the same house. But Bradley had insisted. Image mattered in real estate. Clients expected success. Kirsten answered the door. My daughter-in-law wore white linen pants and a silk blouse, her blonde highlights freshly touched up, nails painted a shade she probably had a name for. She smiled the way she smiled at catering staff and touched my arm. "Harold, so good to see you. Come in, come in." The house smelled like scented candles masking something burnt. Kirsten led me through the foyer, with its cathedral ceiling and crystal chandelier, past the formal living room no one ever sat in, to the kitchen where Bradley stood at the island pouring wine. "Dad." He set down the bottle and crossed to shake my hand. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine. Taking it day by day. That's all you can do." Bradley gestured toward the dining room. "We're eating formal tonight." Kissed and wanted to make it special. The dining room table could seat 12. They'd set 4 places at one end, the expensive china Margaret had given them for their wedding, arranged on a white tablecloth. Cody sat in his chair already, 14 years old, scrolling through his phone. He looked up when I entered. "Hey, Grandpa." "Hey, buddy. How's school?" "Fine." Before I could ask another question, Kirsten swept in with a serving platter. "Pot roast," she announced. "Your father's favorite." It wasn't. Margaret's pot roast was my favorite. Kirsten's version sat gray and dry on the plate, the vegetables overcooked to mush. The meat had that stringy texture that came from cooking too long at too high a temperature. But I said nothing. Grief makes everyone strange. Kirsten was trying. We took our seats. Bradley at the head, Kirsten to his right, me to his left, Cody across from me. Kirsten served the plates, and I watched her portion sizes with the precision I'd applied to defect counting for 35 years. Bradley received a generous mound of meat, 3 large potatoes, a healthy serving of carrots. Cody got a reasonable teenage portion. Kirsten gave herself a modest amount, which she'd push around her plate without eating. My plate held 2 thin slices of meat, 1 small potato, and a handful of vegetables barely visible beneath the gravy. I looked at it. I looked at Bradley's plate. I said nothing. Kirsten caught Cody's eye and shook her head slightly. Dad doesn't eat much anymore, she explained. His appetite's been off since. Cody's fork paused halfway to his mouth. He glanced at me, then at his mother, then back at his plate. I picked up my fork and ate what I was given. Dinner conversation centered on Bradley's work. He was developing a new property on the east side, something called Riverside Commons. Mixed-use retail and residential. Big investment. Big returns. The investors are lined up. Bradley refilled his wine glass without offering me any. 3 guys from Grosse Pointe. Deep pockets. This time next year, we'll be looking at 7 figures easy. Kirsten beamed. We're thinking about the lake house again. Maybe Torch Lake. For summers. I nodded and chewed my dry pot roast. Margaret and I had talked about a lake house once. In 1987. We'd decided we couldn't afford it. We put the money toward Bradley's private school tuition instead. Do you remember that time? Bradley was saying, when I newly closed the Hartwell deal? The one on Woodward? I did remember. He'd talked about it for 3 years. I was this close. Bradley held his thumb and forefinger an inch apart. This close. And then the financing fell through at the last minute. Story of my life. I'd heard this story perhaps 30 times. The details shifted slightly, each telling. The deal got bigger. The loss grew more tragic. Bradley's near success became Bradley's mythology. You already told me about the Hartwell deal. Bradley's fork stopped. He looked at Kirsten. Dad, you just asked about it last week. Remember? When you came over to help Cody with his history project? I hadn't been to their house in 3 weeks. I hadn't helped Cody with anything since his elementary school science fair. That wasn't last week. That was months ago. Bradley and Kirsten exchanged a look. The kind of look that's meant to be seen. The kind that communicates without words. Dad, I think you're getting confused. I'm not confused. It's okay. Kirsten reached across to pat my hand. It happens. We understand. I finished my small portion in silence. Cody kept his eyes on his plate. When I looked at him, he glanced up briefly, then away. Cody wouldn't meet my eyes. The silence stretched until Bradley coughed. The verbal diminishments escalated over the following weeks. At the next Sunday dinner, Bradley interrupted a story I was telling about a production line issue in 1994. Dad, you told us that one already. I hadn't. The Sunday after that, I mentioned Margaret's preference for a particular brand of coffee. And Kirsten shook her head sympathetically. Harold, Margaret didn't drink coffee. She only drank tea. Margaret drank coffee every morning for 41 years. 3 cups. 2 sugars. A splash of cream. I could describe the exact sound of her spoon against the ceramic mug. But I didn't argue. I let it pass. Grief makes everyone strange. Then the questions started. You're getting confused, Dad. Bradley said this when I corrected his memory of our last vacation together. Dad, do you even remember what day it is? He asked this at a 4th of July barbecue in front of neighbors, after I'd mentioned that Margaret's birthday was coming up in August. She'd been dead for 4 months. Of course, I remembered her birthday. The third-person conversations began in September. I sat at their dinner table while Bradley spoke to Kirsten as if I weren't in the room. He's been having trouble with his memory lately. We're worried. I'm right here. Bradley smiled, that real estate smile. I know, Dad. I know. Kirsten nodded along, her face arranged in an expression of concern. We just want what's best for you. At a neighborhood block party in late September, I stood alone by the drinks table, while other guests clustered in small groups. I wasn't antisocial. I'd simply lost my wife, and small talk felt like wearing shoes that didn't fit. Kirsten worked the crowd. I watched her move from group to group, touching arms, leaning close, her voice low and confidential. I caught fragments. Poor Harold, since Margaret passed, getting worse, we're so worried she was planting seeds, building a narrative, creating a consensus among people who'd known me for years, but who would believe a concerned daughter-in-law over their own observations. My mind remained sharp. I could recite the serial number on every major appliance I'd owned since 1978. I could recall the purchase date, vendor, and certificate of authenticity for every piece of jewelry Margaret had collected. I knew exactly how many days had passed since her funeral. 163. But I stayed quiet. Maybe grief did make people strange. Maybe I was losing something I couldn't see. Maybe my son knew things about my deterioration that I was too deteriorated to notice. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe anything except the alternative. The financial requests started in October. Bradley called on a Tuesday evening. I remember the date because I'd just returned from breakfast with Russell at Lakeside Diner. Dad, I need a favor. Bradley sounded stressed. A closing fell through today. I'm short on cash flow. Just until the commission comes in. How much? $5,000. I wrote the check that afternoon. I handed it to Bradley at his office, the same office I'd helped him furnish when he opened his practice 12 years ago. He took it without meeting my eyes. Thanks, Dad. I'll pay you back as soon as the commission clears. No rush. Family helps family. The commission never cleared. Or if it did, Bradley never mentioned it. A month later, I realized I'd never seen the money again. I chose not to bring it up. I didn't want to seem mercenary. I didn't want to embarrass my son. November brought another request. Dad, there's an investment opportunity. Time sensitive. I need $15,000 to secure my position. What kind of investment? Real estate development. Riverside Commons. I told you about it. This is my chance to get in on the ground floor. $15,000 was a significant amount. Even for me. But Bradley had always talked about Riverside Commons like it was his future. His redemption. I wrote the check. The $15,000 vanished the same way the $5,000 had. No updates. No repayment. No acknowledgement that the money had ever existed. $20,000. That's what I'd given my son in 2 months. $20,000 I'd saved over decades of careful living. Gone. But family helps family. Margaret would have wanted me to support Bradley. I told myself this every time doubt crept in. Then came December. Bradley arrived at my house with papers. Psst. Just some documents for you to sign, Dad. Helps with estate planning. Makes things easier for everyone if something happens. He set them on my kitchen table. 3 pages, dense with legal language. What are these? Power of attorney. Standard stuff. Means I can help manage things for you. Pay bills. Handle the house if you're ever incapacitated. I picked up the papers. 35 years of quality control had taught me to read every document before signing. Every word, every clause. The power of attorney was broad. It covered financial decisions, medical decisions, property decisions. It gave Bradley control over my bank accounts, my house, my life. I set the papers down. I'm not comfortable signing this. Something broke in Bradley's expression. The real estate smile disappeared. Something harder replaced it. You don't trust your own son. It's not about trust. It's about wanting to make my own decisions. Dad, you're not thinking clearly. That's what power of attorney is for. To protect you when you can't protect yourself. I can protect myself. Can you? Bradley leaned forward. Because from what I've seen, you can barely remember what day it is. You're confused half the time. Mom kept you organized, and now she's gone. His words hung in the air between us. The truth of them, the cruelty of them. I'm not signing these. Bradley stood up. His chair scraped against the floor. Fine, fine. But when something happens, don't say, I didn't try to help. He left without saying goodbye. The papers remained on my table. I filed them in my study with the documentation of everything else Bradley had done since Margaret's death. The temperature between us dropped 20 degrees after that conversation. Bradley's visits became shorter. 5 minutes instead of an hour. A phone call instead of a visit. Keston stopped including me in the family photos she posted to her blog. I learned this from Dolores, who still followed the account. You're not in any of them anymore. Dolores shook her head. 6 months of pictures. Not one with you. Maybe I wasn't available. Harold, she says she's posting family photos. Your family. Cody started sending me apologetic glances at the dinner table. Small moments when his parents weren't watching. His eyes would meet mine across the table, then quickly away when his mother noticed. Guilt, maybe. Or shame. Or the understanding that what his parents were doing was wrong, even if he couldn't stop it. Through the shared fence, Dolores overheard a conversation in late December. She told me about it the next day, her voice low, her eyes worried. Keston said, he can't live alone forever. Once he's in Shady Pines, we list the house. Shady Pines. I knew the name. A nursing home on the west side. Decent reputation. Expensive monthly rates. What did Bradley say? Nothing. He just agreed with her. I thanked Dolores. I went home. I sat in my study and thought about what my son and his wife were planning. During the following weeks, I began my own quiet investigation. I researched Bradley's business. Not hard to do. Public records. News articles. The real estate development community in Detroit wasn't large. People talked. Riverside Commons had collapsed. The investors had pulled out after discovering Bradley had overestimated returns and underestimated costs. The project sat half-finished on a lot near Eastern Market, a monument to ambition exceeding ability. $340,000. That's what Bradley owed. 3 investors. 3 lawsuits pending, his real estate license under review. He'd hidden all of this from Kirsten. From me. From everyone. The McMansion in West Bloomfield was 3 months behind on mortgage payments. The BMW was leased. The Tag Heuer watch was purchased on credit. Every piece of Bradley's successful image was financed by money he didn't have. And now he was coming for mine. Last month, I found the proof I'd been dreading. Bradley had left his briefcase in my living room after a short visit. Unusual. He normally guarded that briefcase like it contained state secrets. I opened it. Inside, beneath files and contracts and the debris of a failing career, I found brochures. Shady Pines. Memory care. Your loved one deserves the best. $4,200 a month, circled in Bradley's handwriting. Sunrise Senior Living, where every day brings new possibilities. $5,800 for memory care, circled. Pleasant Valley Care Center. Peace of mind for families in transition. Move, in special, highlighted in yellow. Each brochure had prices circled in red ink. Each one had aggressive move-in specials highlighted. Each one promised to take care of me, while Bradley took care of everything else. I replaced the brochures exactly as I'd found them. I closed the briefcase. I returned it to the precise spot where Bradley had left it. When he came back to retrieve it, I said nothing. That night, I sat in my study with Provenance Journal number 17 open on my desk. I turned to a fresh page near the middle. I wrote the date in my careful handwriting. Below it, I added a section header, the same protocol I'd used for documenting defects for 3 decades. Evidence. I wrote down the brochure names, the circled prices, the highlighted specials, the dates, the details. 35 years of quality control had taught me that defects don't fix themselves. They have to be documented, investigated, contained. My son was planning to lock me away and sell everything I'd built. I closed the journal and set it back on the shelf. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. Margaret's photograph watched from the mantel. I would document every step he took until the pattern was complete. Then I would act. Tuesday morning, I pulled into my driveway at 9:15, the same time I'd returned from Lakeside Diner every Tuesday for 20 years. Russell and I had split the check as usual. He'd complained about his daughter's latest boyfriend. I'd listened more than I talked. The first thing I saw was the folding tables. 3 of them, set up across my front lawn without my permission. White plastic legs sinking into grass I'd mowed on Thursday. And on those tables, arranged with the precision of a retail display, sat 40 years of my life. I put the truck in park, but didn't turn off the engine. My hands stayed on the wheel. The radio played something about a summer love that ended badly. I reached over and switched it off. Margaret's silver tea service caught the morning light. The one we'd bought in 1994 at that antique shop in Ann Arbor. Journal number 9, page 47. $320, which was a lot of money back then. She polished it every month until the cancer made her hands shake too much. Someone had slapped a price tag on the sugar bowl. $30. Written in blue marker on a strip of painter's tape. I recognized items from Secure Store Unit 247 spread across those tables. Margaret's antique end tables, her collection of Hummel figurines, boxes of family photographs spanning decades. Bradley had been busy during his weekly raids. I opened my truck door. The engine kept running. I wasn't sure yet if I'd need to make a quick decision. Bradley stood at the center table, talking to a woman in yoga pants. He wore khakis and a blue polo shirt, the same outfit he wore to open houses. His real estate smile stretched wide and practiced. He gestured toward a box of Margaret's Hummel figurines, the collection she'd started when we got engaged in 1981. Kirsten arranged items on a card table near the garage. She moved with efficiency, her highlighted hair catching sunlight, her manicured fingers pressing blue tape onto price tags. She didn't look up when my truck door slammed shut. I walked across my own lawn toward my own possessions, being sold by my own son to strangers I'd never met. My father's pocket watch sat among a pile of costume jewelry on the center table. The gold case was tarnished, but I knew the serial number stamped inside the cover. Inherited 1987, documented in journal number 6. My father had carried that watch through 30 years at the Chrysler plant. He pressed it into my palm at the hospital, 3 days before the emphysema finished him. Price tag, $15. A young couple stood near the edge of the lawn, examining Margaret's rocking chair. The woman ran her hand along the curved armrest, the same armrest Margaret had worn smooth nursing Bradley through colic and ear infections, and those first terrible months when neither of us knew what we were doing. Bradley walked over to them. I heard his voice carry across the lawn, that practiced warmth that could sell anything to anyone. $75. Solid oak. They don't make them like this anymore. The young man pulled out his wallet. I stepped forward. My voice came out level, the same tone I'd used for 35 years when documenting defects on the line. That chair isn't for sale. Bradley's smile tightened. His eyes flicked to me, then back to the couple. He spread his hands in that apologetic gesture he'd perfected at 1,000 open houses. Dad, we talked about this. You agreed to downsize. I didn't agree to sell my wife's things from my own driveway. The young couple exchanged uncomfortable looks. The woman's hand dropped from the armrest. They backed away toward the sidewalk without another word. Bradley watched them go. His jaw worked beneath his skin. When he turned back to me, the real estate smile was still in place, but something harder lived behind his eyes. He spoke to the remaining browsers scattered across the lawn. His voice rose, projecting to make sure everyone heard. My father has dementia. He gets confused about what's his anymore. A woman near the driveway looked up from the box of photographs she'd been sorting through. Photographs of Bradley's 3rd birthday party. Margaret blowing out the candles with him because he couldn't do it alone. Another browser, an older man in a Carhartt jacket, set down the lamp he'd been examining. He looked at me with that particular expression people reserve for the mentally unwell. I said nothing. I watched. Bradley continued, warming to his performance. Dad doesn't know what he's saying. Don't touch Dad's stuff. He gets agitated. Kirsten finally looked up from her price tags. She glanced at me with the same expression she'd wear examining a stain on her carpet. Then she went back to marking items. A woman I didn't recognize approached the center table. Middle-aged, gray roots showing beneath a home dye job. She picked up Margaret's pearl necklace. The strand caught the light as she held it up. 27 cultured pearls, graduated from 4 millimeters at the clasp to 8 millimeters at the center. Rosenthal Jewelers, downtown Detroit, June 1999. Certificate of Authenticity, number RJ, Marj, 1999. I'd saved for 11 months to buy it. Margaret had cried when I gave it to her at dinner that night. How much for this? The woman asked. Bradley took the necklace from her and examined it with theatrical dismissiveness. He turned it over in his hands like it was something he'd found at a flea market. $20. It's costume jewelry. The appraisal from 2 years ago sat in my study. $4,200. I remembered the appraiser's words: excellent luster, minimal surface blemishes, original clasp in working condition. Bradley held out the necklace to the woman. She hesitated. I said nothing. I cataloged the moment. The specific lie. The specific item. The witnesses present. The way Bradley's eyes kept sliding toward me, checking to see if I'd react. He added, louder this time, playing to the remaining browsers. Dad doesn't know what he's saying. He gets agitated about everything these days. I stood still in my own driveway. The Timex ticked on my wrist. Each second, another piece of evidence. Movement on Dolores Finch's porch caught my attention. 71 years old, Margaret's best friend for 3 decades. She stood at her railing with her phone raised, pointed at the garage sale. Recording, documenting, keeping the promise she'd made to Margaret. She'd been recording for at least 10 minutes by the time I noticed. The woman with the pearls set them back on the table. She stepped back, her hand moving to her purse strap. She walked away without buying anything. Bradley's smile faltered for just a moment. He glanced at Kirsten, who shrugged without looking up from her price tags. The morning sun climbed higher. More browsers drifted through, picking up items, setting them down. A man bought my father's pocket watch for $15. I watched him pocket it without looking at the case. A woman haggled over the Hummel figurines and got 6 of them for $40. Margaret had paid $300 for the collection. I stood and watched and said nothing. Then Bradley picked up the mahogany jewelry box. Margaret's jewelry box. The one with brass hinges that had sat on her nightstand for 43 years. The box I'd moved to storage because I couldn't bear to see it every morning. Bradley must have retrieved it during one of his raids on Unit 247. The box where she'd kept her everyday pieces, the earrings she wore to church, the bracelet her mother had given her before she died. Bradley opened it, tilting the box toward the light, checking for anything valuable he might have missed during his previous raids. His fingers ran along the velvet lining, then stopped. I watched his face change. First confusion. His brow furrowed as his fingertips traced something wrong with the bottom of the box. A seam that shouldn't be there. A panel that shifted under pressure. Then recognition. His eyes widened slightly. He pressed down on one corner and the false bottom popped up, revealing a hidden compartment I never knew existed. Then fear. Bradley's hand shook as he extracted yellowed bank statements from the compartment. Documents with dates from 15 years ago. Papers that predated recent events. He stared at them for a long moment, his real estate composure crumbling like a house built on sand. A small USB drive followed, wrapped in a faded photograph. He held it in his palm like it might explode. Bradley looked up from the box and met my eyes. For the first time in months, I saw my son clearly. Not confused, not helping, not concerned about my welfare. Terrified. Whatever Margaret had hidden in that false bottom, whatever evidence she'd collected and preserved all those years ago, it changed everything Bradley thought he'd gotten away with. My wife had known, long before she died. She'd known what kind of man her son had become, and she prepared for this moment. Bradley snapped the jewelry box shut. His hands trembled as he shoved it under the table, away from the remaining browsers, away from anyone who might have seen what he'd found. Sales over. His voice cracked on the second word. The smoothness was gone. The practiced warmth had evaporated. A confused browser holding a picture frame started to ask something. Everyone leave. Now. The remaining browsers exchanged puzzled looks. The woman set down the frame. The man in the Carhartt jacket shrugged and walked toward his truck. Bradley grabbed a lamp, nearly dropped it, shoved it into a box sideways. His hands fumbled with the tape gun. Sweat darkened the back of his polo shirt. Kirsten watched him with narrowed eyes. "What's wrong with you?" Bradley didn't answer. He grabbed the jewelry box from under the table and clutched it against his chest. I stood still in my own driveway. The Timex ticked on my wrist. The morning sun warmed my face. I watched my son scramble to hide something his mother had documented years ago, evidence of crimes he thought were buried. Dolores Finch remained on her porch, phone still raised, still recording. Bradley loaded the jewelry box into the back seat of his BMW. He threw 3 boxes of items after it, not bothering to close the doors between trips. Kirsten collected her tape gun and markers, her expression shifting from confusion to concern, to something that might have been calculation. They drove away at 10:14. I watched the BMW turn at the corner and disappear. The folding tables remained on my lawn, empty except for a few items no one had wanted. A chipped vase, a box of old magazines, a pair of bookends shaped like elephants that Margaret had bought at a garage sale 30 years ago. I walked back to my truck. The engine was still running. I'd never turned it off. Inside the house, I sat in my study chair and looked at Margaret's photograph on the mantel. 57 years old in that picture, laughing at something I'd said during a family barbecue. The last summer before the diagnosis. "You knew," I said to the empty room. "You knew all along." She tried to tell me at the end. Box. Hidden. Evidence. The words made sense now. She'd been pointing me toward her provisions, the protection she'd built against the day her son finally betrayed us both. The rest of the day passed. I made lunch, ate half of it, washed the single plate, and put it back in the cabinet. The house felt the same as it had that morning, though nothing was the same. At 6:47 that evening, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. No text message, just a photograph attachment. I opened it. A folded piece of notebook paper, photographed against a wooden desk. The handwriting was neat, the kind of penmanship they still taught at the private school we paid for. Cody's handwriting. My 14-year-old grandson. The note read, "Grandpa, they're taking stuff from your storage unit. I'm sorry. Don't tell them I told you." I stared at the photograph for a long time. The light outside my window faded from gold to gray to black. Cody had sent this anonymously, using what must have been a prepaid phone or a borrowed number. He'd risked his parents' anger to warn me. He'd chosen sides in a war he never asked to fight. I saved the photograph to my phone. Then I pulled Provenance Journal number 17 from its shelf and turned to the evidence section. I wrote down the date, the time, the photograph of the garage sale from Dolores, the pearl necklace offered for $20, the rocking chair Bradley tried to sell for $75, the jewelry box with its false bottom, Margaret's hidden evidence. And at the bottom of the page, in my handwriting, I added, "Cody knows. Cody chose." The Timex on my wrist showed 9:18. I wound it the same way I'd wound it every night for 23 years. The mechanism engaged with its familiar click. Tomorrow, I would call Russell. Tomorrow, I would ask about the best elder law attorneys in Wayne County. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of documenting everything my son had done and everything Margaret had prepared for. But tonight, I sat in my study and thought about a 14-year-old boy who understood right and wrong better than his parents ever would. The house settled around me in the darkness. Margaret's chair sat empty across the room. Her photograph watched from the mantel. I didn't speak to her tonight. I didn't need to. She'd already said everything that mattered, 15 years ago, in a mahogany jewelry box with a false bottom and brass hinges worn smooth by her fingers. Tuesday morning, Russell Pratt sat across from me at Lakeside Diner, his coffee cup untouched for the first time in 20 years. I'd just finished talking. The words had come out in a single, unbroken stream. Everything from the storage unit thefts, to the dementia narrative, to the nursing home brochures, to the garage sale, to the jewelry box. I'd laid it all out on the table between us, like evidence at a crime scene. Russell hadn't interrupted once. 25 years as county sheriff had taught him to listen before judging. He sat with his hands folded on the Formica tabletop, coffee untouched. The diner hummed around us, forks scraping plates, the coffee machine hissing, someone laughing at the counter. Normal sounds. Tuesday sounds. Russell picked up his coffee and took a long sip. He set it down carefully. "You need Amanda Zhao." I didn't recognize the name. Elder law attorney. Best in Wayne County. She specializes in cases like this. Family perpetrators who think blood protects them from consequences. How do you know her? She prosecuted my nephew's case 3 years ago. His wife's brother tried to drain her mother's accounts while the old woman was in hospice. Amanda got him 18 months and full restitution. The waitress refilled my cup without asking. I wrapped my hands around the ceramic, feeling the warmth seep into my fingers. Russell leaned forward. "Harold, you need to move fast. Whatever Bradley found in that jewelry box, he knows you're onto him now. He'll be covering his tracks." I thought about my son's face when he opened that false bottom. The way his hands had trembled. The way he'd shoved the box under the table and cleared everyone out. There's something else. Margaret tried to tell me something at the end, about the jewelry box. I thought it was the morphine, but she was trying to warn me. Russell nodded slowly. "Then you need to see what she left you." I drove home after breakfast. The house sat quiet in the morning light, same as always. Same brick colonial I'd built with 42 years of mortgage payments. Same detached garage where Bradley had learned to ride a bicycle. Same backyard where I'd taught him to throw a baseball when his hands were still small enough to struggle with the grip. The jewelry box wasn't in my house. Bradley had taken it with him when he fled the garage sale, along with 3 boxes of items he'd thrown into his BMW in a panic. But I knew my son, knew his patterns, knew his weaknesses. I drove to West Bloomfield. The McMansion looked the same as always. 4,000 square feet of financed furniture and desperate appearances. Kirsten's Lexus sat in the driveway. Bradley's BMW was gone. I parked at the curb and walked to the front door. My Timex showed 10:47 a.m. Bradley would be at his office, pretending his career hadn't collapsed. Kirsten would be inside, maintaining the image she'd built on credit and denial. I rang the bell. Kirsten opened the door. Her face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds: surprise, then wariness, then the practiced concern she'd been wearing for months. "Harold, is everything okay? I need to get something Bradley borrowed." She didn't move from the doorway. What did he borrow? Margaret's jewelry box. The wariness sharpened. Kirsten's hand tightened on the doorframe. Her manicured nails pressed into the wood. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The mahogany box, with brass hinges. Bradley took it from my house yesterday. It belongs to me. You should talk to Bradley about this." "I'm talking to you." Kirsten's composure cracked. Just for a moment. Her eyes flicked toward the interior of the house, toward something she didn't want me to see. "Wait here." She closed the door. I stood on the porch and counted the seconds on my Timex. 47 seconds. 48. 49. The door opened again. Kirsten held the jewelry box in both hands, like it might bite her. She thrust it toward me without meeting my eyes. "Here, take it." I accepted the box. The weight felt wrong, lighter than it should be. The velvet compartments inside would be empty. "Did he tell you what he found inside?" Kirsten's face went blank. "I don't know what you mean." "The false bottom. The documents Margaret hid 15 years ago." She said nothing. Her eyes told me she knew exactly what I meant. "Thank you for the box, Kirsten." I turned and walked back to my truck. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The way she'd held that box, the way her voice had tightened when I mentioned the false bottom, told me everything. They were scared now. Both of them. Good. I drove home and carried the jewelry box into my study. Set it on my desk next to Provenance Journal number 17. The brass hinges were still smooth from Margaret's fingers. The mahogany still held a faint trace of her perfume. I lifted the lid. Empty velvet compartments where her earrings should have been. Her bracelet gone, her mother's cameo missing. But the false bottom remained. I pressed the corner the way I'd seen Bradley do. The panel shifted and popped up, revealing the hidden compartment Margaret had constructed sometime in the past 15 years. Yellowed bank statements. 6 of them, folded neatly, dated from March through August of 2009. I spread them across my desk and examined each one with the attention I'd given to defect reports for 35 years. $28,000 in unauthorized transfers over 6 months. The withdrawals started small, 500 here, 800 there, then grew larger as whoever made them grew confident. 3,000, 4,000. A final withdrawal of 6,200. Each withdrawal slip bore a signature. Bradley's signature. I recognized his handwriting immediately. The careless loops, the way he never quite closed his capital letters. But Margaret's note told me what I would have discovered myself. The slant was off. The pressure inconsistent. I pulled out a magnifying glass from my desk drawer and compared the signatures to samples of Bradley's actual handwriting I had on file. Forged. Bradley had forged his own signature, making the copies slightly wrong so he could claim fraud if caught. The B in Bradley leaned too far left. The Y at the end curved wrong. Deliberate imperfections to create deniability. I set the bank statements aside and reached back into the false bottom. A USB drive wrapped in a faded photograph. I unwrapped it carefully. The photograph showed Bradley at 16, standing next to his first car, a used Honda Civic we'd bought him for his birthday. He was grinning at the camera, all teenage arrogance and borrowed confidence. Margaret had taken that picture. I remembered the day. The USB drive was small and black. I plugged it into my computer and watched the files load. Scanned copies of everything. The bank statements, the withdrawal slips, close-up photographs of the forged signatures with handwritten notes, comparing them to Bradley's actual handwriting. Margaret had been thorough. Margaret had been building a case. And there was one more file. A Word document titled Harold Docs. I opened it. My darling Harold, I hope you never need this. I hope Bradley has grown into the man we hoped he'd become, and this evidence stays hidden forever. But if you're reading this, then he's betrayed you the way he betrayed us 15 years ago. In 2009, I discovered $28,000 missing from our joint account. I traced the withdrawals and found Bradley's signature on each one. At first, I thought someone had stolen his identity. Then I compared the signatures to his actual handwriting and realized the truth. Our son forged his own signature. He made the withdrawals himself, then covered his tracks by making the signatures slightly wrong so he could claim fraud if caught. He thought he was being clever. I confronted him privately. He cried. He apologized. He swore he'd pay back every penny. I chose to protect the family. I chose not to tell you because I knew it would break your heart. That was my mistake. He never paid back the money. He never changed. I watched him over the years, watched the entitlement grow, watched him take and take and take while giving nothing in return. I should have told you then. I should have let you see what he was. But I loved our son, and I loved you, and I couldn't bear to be the one who destroyed that. If you're reading this, then Bradley has done it again. He's hurt you. He's stolen from you. He's taken advantage of your grief and your trust. Here is your proof. He's done it before. He'll do it again. I love you, Harold. Trust your instincts. M.I. read the letter 3 times. Each time the words hit the same way. Not harder, not softer. Just the same weight, settling into my chest like stones dropped into still water. Margaret had known. For 15 years. She'd carried this alone, protecting me from a truth she thought would destroy me. She'd been wrong about that. The truth wouldn't destroy me. It would arm me. I called Amanda Zhao's office at 2:15 p.m. Her receptionist scheduled an emergency consultation for the following morning. Amanda Zhao's downtown Detroit office occupied the 14th floor of a building I'd walked past 100 times without noticing. The elevator smelled like old coffee and new carpet. The reception area featured chairs designed for discomfort and a wall of framed credentials that told me everything I needed to know about Amanda's qualifications. She met me at 9 a.m. sharp. 45 years old, dark hair pulled back, a gray suit that cost more than my truck payment. Her handshake was firm without being aggressive. Her eyes assessed me the way I assessed production line defects. Quick and thorough and missing nothing. Mr. Whitmore. Russell speaks highly of you. Russell exaggerates. Russell doesn't exaggerate about anything. That's why I trust his referrals. She led me to her office. A desk covered with organized files. Windows overlooking Woodward Avenue. No personal photographs. No plants. This was a workspace, not a showroom. Tell me everything. I did. I started with Margaret's death and worked forward. The visits from Bradley. The verbal diminishments. The financial requests. The power of attorney attempt. The nursing home brochures. The garage sale. The jewelry box discovery. Margaret's letter. The USB drive with 15 years of evidence. Amanda took notes on a yellow legal pad, her handwriting neat and efficient. The scratch of her pen on paper filled the silences between my sentences. When I finished, she set down her pen. Do you have the documentation with you? I brought everything. The provenance journals. Margaret's bank statements from 2009. The USB drive. The storage access logs Patricia had emailed me. My medical appointment calendar for the past 6 months. Amanda spread the materials across her desk. She cross-referenced the storage access logs with my calendar first, her finger tracing from one document to the other. Every significant withdrawal corresponds to a documented medical appointment. She looked up. That's not coincidence. That's planning. She examined Margaret's bank statements next, comparing the forged signatures to samples of Bradley's actual handwriting from the rejected power of attorney filing. These signatures are close, but not identical. Your son forged them himself and made them slightly wrong to create deniability if caught. Your wife's analysis was correct. Margaret believed Bradley forged his own signature. That's consistent with the pattern I'm seeing. Amanda set down the statements. 15 years ago, he stole $28,000. This time, the scope is larger. She began calculating, pulling out a legal pad and working through my provenance journal entries against the storage access logs. I watched her cross-reference each item with its documented value. The pearl necklace, appraised at $4,200. The silver tea service, appraised at $1,200. The Hummel figurine collection, appraised at $1,800. Your father's pocket watch, sentimental value aside, appraised at $600. She continued through the list. Margaret's antique furniture from her grandmother, appraised last year at $32,000. The coin collection, I documented in journal number 8, worth $18,000. Family jewelry spanning 4 decades, conservatively valued at $45,000 based on my records. The numbers accumulated. Amanda worked through 3 months of documented thefts, each item verified by my obsessive record-keeping. Approximately $127,000 in stolen assets over 3 months. She looked up. Combined with the earlier $28,000 your wife documented, we're looking at $155,000 in total theft spanning 15 years. I said nothing. The number sat between us like something dead. The theft alone constitutes multiple felonies. Amanda continued. But there's more. The dementia narrative your daughter-in-law has been spreading, that's defamation. The forged power of attorney filing, that's fraud. The attempts to institutionalize you under false pretenses, that's elder abuse. She pulled out a fresh legal pad. Here's what we do. First, I subpoena the secure store access logs officially. We'll have them within 48 hours. Second, we arrange a cognitive assessment with a neuropsychologist. That destroys the dementia narrative legally. I already have the storage logs. Patricia at Secure Store emailed them to me. Good, but we need them court-ordered for evidence purposes. Third, we freeze all accounts Bradley has accessed. Emergency motion. I can file it today. What about the conservatorship he was planning? Amanda's jaw tightened. She set down her pen. We block it. The assessment results will show you're mentally competent. Once that's established, any conservatorship petition becomes fraudulent on its face. She stood and walked to her window, looking out at the city below. Mr. Whitmore, I have to ask, are you prepared for what this means? Criminal charges against your son. Possible prison time. Your family exposed publicly. I thought about Margaret's letter. Trust your instincts. My son stopped being family when he decided to steal from me. I'm prepared. Amanda nodded. Then let's get to work. The cognitive assessment took place 3 days later. Russell had arranged it through his contacts, a neuropsychologist named Dr. Chen, who specialized in elder competency evaluations. The tests lasted 4 hours. Memory exercises. Dr. Chen showed me a series of numbers, 7, 4, 9, 2, 8. I repeated them forward, then backward, then in ascending order. Pattern recognition. Verbal reasoning. Mathematical calculations. I answered each question with the same attention I'd given to defect reports for 35 years. Dr. Chen's report arrived by courier on Friday morning. Mr. Harold Whitmore demonstrates mental acuity in the 94th percentile for his age group. Testing reveals no indication of dementia or cognitive decline. Mr. Whitmore exhibits exceptional memory and analytical reasoning throughout the assessment. I read the report twice. 94th percentile. Bradley had been telling everyone I couldn't remember what day it was. The neuropsychologist said, my memory exceeded 94% of people my age. I made copies of the report and added them to my evidence file. The court-ordered inventory of Secure Store Unit 247 happened the following Tuesday. A specialist named Hendricks met me at the facility with a clipboard and a camera. We walked through the unit together. Empty shelves where Margaret's antique furniture had stood. Bare walls where family photographs had hung. Gaps in the rows of boxes where 40 years of memories had been systematically removed. Hendricks documented everything, photographed the empty spaces, cross-referenced my provenance journals against what remained. The damage was extensive. Margaret's grandmother's secretary desk, gone. The mahogany dining set we'd received as a wedding gift, gone. 4 decades of family photographs, gone. Irreplaceable memories converted to cash for Bradley's debts. But one bright spot emerged. The woman who'd bought the pearl necklace at the garage sale. She'd contacted Dolores after hearing about the investigation. Horrified to learn she'd bought stolen property, she'd returned the necklace immediately, refusing any compensation. I held the pearls in my palm. 27 graduated cultured pearls. Rosenthal Jewelers, Certificate RJ 78999-847. Margaret had worn these to every important occasion for 18 years. Amanda filed the emergency motions that afternoon. Account freezes. Conservatorship block. Elder abuse investigation referral to the county prosecutor. But one more discovery waited in the jewelry box's false bottom. A document I'd overlooked in my first examination, tucked beneath the USB drive. A life insurance policy, taken out 5 years ago. $150,000, naming me as sole beneficiary. The policy included a survivorship clause. I had to survive Margaret by 1 year to claim the benefit. I looked at the calendar. Margaret had died 8 months ago. The policy would pay out in 4 months. Bradley's timeline made sense now. The escalating thefts, the nursing home brochures, the power of attorney attempts, the conservatorship planning. He needed me incapacitated or institutionalized before the year was up, before I could claim the insurance money, before his creditors closed in. He wasn't just stealing from me. He was racing a clock. I sat in my study and looked at Margaret's photograph on the mantel. 57 years old. Laughing at that summer barbecue. Silver hair catching the sunlight. You knew. I wound my Timex, feeling the mechanism engage with its familiar click. You always knew. She'd left me everything I needed. The evidence, the documentation, the insurance policy that explained Bradley's urgency. My wife had protected me from beyond the grave. Now it was my turn to finish what she'd started. I called Bradley on Thursday evening. My voice carried the fatigue I'd been practicing in front of the bathroom mirror since the previous night. I want to talk about the future, I said. Sunday dinner, here at the house. Bradley's voice lifted. Dad, that sounds great. Keston and I were just saying we should get together, talk things through. Margaret's pot roast recipe. I let the words hang, the way she used to make it. A pause. Then, that sounds perfect, Dad. We'll be there. I hung up and looked at the phone in my hand. My son thought he was coming to close a deal. He thought I was ready to sign over my life. He was half right. Sunday arrived sharp and bright. November in Michigan. The kind of day Margaret would have spent in the kitchen, the pot roast already slow cooking since morning, the house filling with the smell of her grandmother's recipe. I'd started the roast at 6 a.m. 3 pounds of beef, carrots, potatoes, onions. Ingredients she'd used for 40 years. The cast-iron Dutch oven from her 1982 wedding gift. By noon, the house smelled the way it should smell on a Sunday. Like family. Like tradition. Like everything Bradley was trying to steal. At 2:15 p.m., I texted Amanda Zhao. 30 minutes. Her reply came in 4 seconds. In position. I walked to the front window and looked down the block. Russell Pratt's sedan sat 3 houses away, positioned with a clear view of my driveway. Russell hadn't asked questions when I'd called him. He'd just said he'd be there. Amanda's car waited in the church parking lot across the street. Close enough to arrive in under a minute. Far enough not to be noticed by someone pulling into my driveway. Bradley's BMW turned the corner at 2:47 p.m., right on time. He always arrived early for closings. I watched him park in my driveway. The same driveway where he'd run a garage sale 2 weeks ago, selling Margaret's things to strangers, while calling me senile. He got out of the car wearing pressed khakis and a cable-knit sweater. Successful son, helping aging father. The costume was perfect. Kirsten emerged from the passenger side. White wool coat, designer boots. Her highlighted hair caught the afternoon light. She carried a bottle of wine like it was a prop, which it was. They walked to my front door. I watched them exchange a glance before Bradley raised his hand to knock. I opened the door before his knuckles touched wood. Come in? Bradley's smile spread wide, his real estate smile. The one that had sold 300 houses before Riverside Commons collapsed. Dad. He gripped my shoulder with rehearsed warmth. Good to see you. Kirsten leaned in and kissed my cheek. The scent of her perfume was wrong. Too sharp. Too expensive. Margaret had worn Chanel, no. 5 for 40 years. The house smells wonderful, Harold. Just like Margaret used to make. I led them through the foyer to the dining room. The table was set with Margaret's good china. The white tablecloth she'd bought for our 25th anniversary. 3 places at one end, the candles already lit. Bradley surveyed the room with the eye of a man calculating square footage. You've kept the place up well, Dad. I know it must be hard, maintaining a house this size on your own. I gestured to the chairs. Sit. I'll bring out the roast. In the kitchen, I carved the meat with steady hands. The beef fell apart at the touch of the knife, just the way Margaret used to make it. I arranged the portions on serving plates, added the vegetables, and carried everything to the dining room on the tray we'd used for 40 years of Sunday dinners. Bradley had poured himself a glass of the wine Kirsten brought. He swirled it in the crystal stemware, playing the role of casual guest in a house he planned to sell. I set plates in front of them. Then I took my seat at the head of the table. For a moment, none of us spoke. The candles flickered. Outside, a car passed on the street. Normal sounds. Sunday sounds. Bradley cut into his pot roast. This is delicious, Dad. Tastes just like Mom's. It is Mom's. Her recipe. Her Dutch oven. Her hands used to touch this same knife. Bradley set down his fork. His smile flickered but held. We need to talk about some things, Dad. Kirsten and I have been doing a lot of research. There are some really wonderful senior living communities that would be perfect for you. Kirsten nodded on cue. Places with trained staff. Social activities. You wouldn't have to worry about maintaining the house anymore. I picked up my own fork. Chewed a piece of carrot. Said nothing. Bradley filled the silence the way he always did. The way he'd learned from 100 nervous buyers who couldn't stand quiet. Shady Pines has an excellent memory care unit. Very comfortable. Kirsten toured it last week. They have a waiting list, but I know someone who can get you in quickly. I chewed, swallowed. said nothing. Bradley's fork scraped against his plate. The sound was loud in the quiet dining room. The thing is, Dad, this house is too much for you now. I know you don't want to hear it, but it's the truth. A place like this, at your age, alone? It's not safe. I set down my fork. Bradley leaned forward, sensing an opening. We could list the house in the spring. Get top dollar. The money would cover your care for years, and whatever's left would go to the family estate. The family estate. That was a new phrase. Bradley had been workshopping his pitch. And the power of attorney, Dad. I know we talked about it before, but it would make everything so much easier. I could handle the details while you focus on getting settled somewhere comfortable. I looked at my son, 40 years old, my only child, the boy I'd taught to ride a bicycle in this very driveway. Before we discuss my future, I said, let's discuss yours. I reached under my chair and pulled out the manila folder I'd placed there that morning. Set it on the white tablecloth between us. Bradley's smile held, but something shifted behind his eyes. Kirsten's hand stopped mid-reach for her wineglass. What's this? Evidence. Bradley laughed. A short, uncomfortable sound. Evidence of what, Dad? I opened the folder. The neuropsychologist's report sat on top. Dr. Chen's cognitive assessment. Conducted last Tuesday. 4 hours of testing. I slid it across the table. 94th percentile for my age group. No indication of dementia or cognitive decline. Exceptional memory and analytical reasoning throughout the assessment. Bradley's eyes scanned the document. His jaw tightened. Dad, these tests aren't always accurate. I pulled out the next document. Secure Store Access Logs. Unit 247. Every entry for the past 3 months. Bradley's face went pale. 23 visits. I traced my finger down the column of timestamps. Every one of them matches a time when I was at a medical appointment or my Tuesday breakfast with Russell. You timed your thefts to my schedule. That's not. Bradley's voice cracked. I was helping organize Mom's things. Bank statements followed. I spread them across the tablecloth like a hand of cards. $127,000 in unauthorized transfers. I pointed to the highlighted entries, cross-referenced with my calendar. You withdrew money while I was at the cardiologist's office, while I was getting blood drawn, while I was sitting in a waiting room, wondering why my son never called anymore. Kirsten's hand finally reached her wine glass. She drained half of it in one swallow. I produced the photographs next. Images of items sold at the garage sale. Each one annotated with entries from my provenance journals. Margaret's silver tea service. Purchased 1994. Documented in journal number 9. You sold it for $30. It appraised at $1,200. Dad, her Hummel figurine collection. Documented in journal number 4. 18 items. Appraised value, $1,800. You sold them for $40 total. This is a misunderstanding. My father's pocket watch. I kept my voice level. Inherited, 1987. Documented in journal number 6. Appraised at $600. You sold it for $15. Bradley pushed back from the table. His chair scraped against the hardwood floor Margaret had polished every month for 40 years. I can explain. I pulled out Provenance Journal number 12, set it on the table, and opened to a flagged page. The pearl necklace. Certificate of Authenticity number. J. 1999, 0847. Rosenthal Jewelers, downtown Detroit, June 1999. Appraised 2 years ago at $4,200. I looked up at my son. You sold it for $20. You told the buyer it was costume jewelry. Bradley's real estate composure crumbled. The smooth talker who could sell anything to anyone stood silent in his father's dining room, surrounded by evidence of his own crimes. Dad, you're confused. I produced the cognitive assessment again. pointed to the relevant line. 94th percentile. Exceptional memory. No indication of dementia. He stared at the document. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. I turned to Kirsten. The narrative you've been spreading to my neighbors, my doctor, the bank. It's documented defamation. Her wine glass trembled in her hand. Dolores Finch kept records. Every conversation. Every time you told someone I had dementia, she wrote down the date, the location, the exact words you used. That nosy old woman had no right. She had every right. She promised Margaret she'd watch over me. I pulled out the final documents from the folder. Margaret's bank statements from 15 years ago. Her typed letter. The evidence she'd hidden in her jewelry box for a decade and a half, waiting for this moment. Your mother knew, Bradley. His face went gray. $28,000. Stolen from our joint account in 2009. She traced every withdrawal. Compared the forged signatures to your actual handwriting. No. She confronted you privately. You cried. You apologized. You promised to pay it back. I set down Margaret's letter. You never did. Bradley's legs seemed to give out. He caught himself on the edge of the table. This is a family matter. His voice rose, desperate now. We can work this out. I can explain everything. You have 3 investors pursuing fraud charges for Riverside Commons. He flinched like I'd struck him. $340,000 in debt. Your real estate license is under review. You opened a home equity line against your house without telling your wife. I watched Kirsten's face as this information registered. Not shock at my words, but at the revelation of debt Bradley had hidden from her. You told me we were fine. Her voice was ice. You said Riverside Commons was going to pay off. Bradley turned to her. Kirsten, I was going to tell you. You took out a second mortgage on our house without telling me. I can fix this. She stood up so fast her chair fell backward. You've been lying to me for how long? The front door opened. Amanda Zhao entered first, her gray suit professional, her expression neutral. Behind her came a man in his 50s, with a county prosecutor's badge clipped to his belt. Bradley Whitmore. Amanda's voice cut through the domestic chaos. You're under investigation for elder financial abuse, theft, fraud, and forgery. She set papers on the table. 3 documents. Asset freeze. Restraining order. Preliminary hearing date. Bradley stared at the papers. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. The front door opened again. Russell Pratt stepped inside, having moved from his car on Amanda's signal. His retired sheriff's posture blocked the exit. He said nothing. He didn't need to. Kirsten backed away from her husband. Her face shifted through emotions I recognized from 35 years of reading people on the line. Shock. Anger. Calculation. The realization that her perfect life had just collapsed. You lied to me. She jabbed a manicured finger at Bradley. About everything. The money. The debt. The house. Kirsten, please, don't. She grabbed her purse from the side table. Don't even speak to me. She pushed past Russell and out the door. Her heels clicked on the front steps. A moment later, her rideshare app chimed through the open doorway. Bradley stood alone in my dining room. The dining room where I'd fed him thousands of meals. Where Margaret had sung Happy Birthday over homemade cakes. Where we'd celebrated graduations and promotions and holidays for 40 years. Dad. His voice was barely a whisper. Please. I stood up. My posture was straight. The same posture I'd maintained through 35 years on the factory floor, through thousands of quality control inspections, through the discovery that my own son was a thief. I spent 35 years catching defects at Ford. Bradley's eyes were wet. His hands shook at his sides. Did you really think I wouldn't notice when something didn't fit in my own family? He said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Amanda stepped forward. Mr. Whitmore, you'll need to come with us to answer some questions. Bradley looked at me one last time. Not the confident real estate agent. Not the entitled son planning to institutionalize his father. Just a man who'd finally run out of lies. Russell escorted him out the front door. Amanda gathered the served papers and followed. I stood alone in my dining room. The candles still flickered. The pot roast grew cold on the plates. Margaret's good china reflected the candlelight. The same pattern she'd picked out 40 years ago when we were young and believed our children would honor us. I walked to the window and watched them put my son in the back of Amanda's car. He didn't look back at the house. The Timex on my wrist ticked. Margaret had given it to me for our 20th anniversary. 23 years of reliable service. 23 years of keeping perfect time. Some things endured. Some things kept their value. I looked at the empty chair where Bradley had been sitting. At the uneaten pot roast on his plate. At Margaret's photograph, watching from the mantel. The house settled around me in the quiet. Not the heavy silence of grief anymore. Something different. Something finished. I wound my watch, one extra click, and listened to the mechanism engage. 6 weeks after the Sunday dinner confrontation, the charges came down in December. Wayne County Courthouse held Bradley for the following months. Gray stone and narrow windows. The kind of architecture designed to make people feel small. I'd walked past it 1,000 times during my years at Ford without ever going inside. Now I knew every hallway, every water fountain, every uncomfortable wooden bench in the waiting areas. The charges reflected everything Bradley had done. Theft over $1,000 from a person over 65. Elder financial exploitation. Fraud, multiple counts. Forgery. Amanda Zhao had worked with the county prosecutor to ensure the charging documents captured the full pattern. Not just the storage unit theft. Not just the garage sale. 15 years of taking what didn't belong to him. Bradley's court-appointed attorney was a woman named Patricia Vance. Public defender, 15 years on the job. The kind of tired that comes from watching guilty people claim innocence day after day. She'd advised Bradley to take a plea deal. Reduce charges. Maybe 4 years instead of 7. He refused. I sat in the gallery during the plea hearing and watched my son shake his head at his own lawyer. He still stood with his shoulders back, chin up. Same posture I'd seen at 100 open houses. He still believed he could talk his way out. Sell the jury the same way he'd sold houses to people who couldn't afford them. Patricia Vance's expression told me everything I needed to know about how that strategy would work. The preliminary hearing took place in February. Room 402, the Honorable Judge Marcus Chen presiding. The courtroom smelled like floor polish and old paper. Bradley sat at the defense table in a county-issued jumpsuit, his expensive haircut growing out, his Tag Heuer watch confiscated as evidence. I took the stand at 10:17 a.m. The prosecutor, a man named David Reyes, walked me through the evidence piece by piece. I'd prepared the way I'd prepared for quality control presentations at Ford. Every document organized. Every fact verified. Every number cross-referenced. Mr. Whitmore, can you identify this document? I looked at the paper Reyes handed me. My documentation from journal number 12. Page 47. This is my record of the pearl necklace I purchased for my wife on our 17th anniversary. Rosenthal Jewelers, downtown Detroit, June 1999. Certificate of Authenticity Number, RJ 1999-0847. And this document? The storage unit access log from Secure Store. It shows every time someone entered Unit 247 using a key code. Reyes highlighted the relevant entries. Can you tell the court what these timestamps indicate? I traced my finger down the column. These are the 23 times my son accessed the storage unit over 3 months. Every one of them corresponds to a time when I was at a medical appointment or my Tuesday breakfast with Russell Pratt. He timed his thefts to my schedule. Bradley's attorney objected. Speculation. Judge Chen overruled. I continued. The bank statements came next. The forged signatures. The neuropsychological evaluation showing my mental acuity in the 94th percentile for my age group. No indication of dementia or cognitive decline, I said, reading from Dr. Chen's report. Exceptional memory and analytical reasoning throughout the assessment. Reyes nodded and moved to his final exhibit. Mr. Whitmore, can you identify this document? He handed me Margaret's letter. The paper was yellowed. The ink had faded, but her handwriting remained clear. This is a letter from my wife. She wrote it 15 years ago and hid it in a false bottom of her jewelry box. What does the letter describe? I read the relevant passage aloud. The courtroom went silent. In 2009, I discovered $28,000 missing from our joint account. I traced the withdrawals and found Bradley's signature on each one. Our son forged his own signature. He made the withdrawals himself, then covered his tracks by making the signatures slightly wrong so he could claim fraud if caught. I looked up from the letter. The color drained from Bradley's face. His mouth hung open. My mother knew. The words escaped him before he could stop them. His attorney grabbed his arm and hissed something I couldn't hear. But the damage was done. Everyone in the courtroom had heard. Judge Chen made a note. His pen scratched against paper in the silence. The bail modification hearing followed. Patricia Vance argued for house arrest. Flight risk was minimal. Bradley had ties to the community. Reyes countered with evidence of ongoing deception. The hidden home equity line. The investor debts Bradley had concealed from his own wife. The pattern of lies stretching back 15 years. Judge Chen denied the modification. Bradley would remain in county jail, awaiting trial. I watched the deputies lead my son out of the courtroom. His jumpsuit was too large. His shoulders slumped forward. He didn't look back at me. The civil consequences came faster than the criminal ones. The 3 Riverside Commons investors filed their lawsuits within 2 weeks of the preliminary hearing. The criminal charges had emboldened them. Bradley couldn't hide behind his real estate agent's smile anymore. The courts had labeled him exactly what he was. The Michigan Real Estate Commission suspended Bradley's license pending investigation. 15 years of selling houses. Gone. Not that he could sell anything from a jail cell. The McMansion in West Bloomfield entered foreclosure in March. 3 months behind on mortgage payments. The secret home equity line Bradley had opened without telling Kirsten had finally surfaced in the discovery process. The bank wanted its money. Bradley couldn't pay. Kirsten filed for divorce the same week. I learned this from Amanda Zhao, who'd been tracking Bradley's collapsing life with professional interest. Kirsten's filing cited irreconcilable differences. The legal language was polite. The reality was financial calculation. She's protecting herself from his creditors, Amanda explained. Michigan's an equitable distribution state. By divorcing now, she can argue the debts were incurred through fraud she didn't know about. What about Cody? Amanda's expression softened. She's taking him to Ohio. Her family's there, the trailer park. Kirsten had spent 15 years escaping those origins. Marrying Bradley. Building that mansion. Curating that mommy blog with its picture-perfect family photos. All of it gone. I looked up Kirsten's blog one evening in late March. The last post was dated February 12th, the day after Bradley's bail was denied. A photo of their swimming pool. Blue water reflecting winter sky. The caption read, "Looking forward to summer adventures." No posts since then. The blog sat frozen in time, a monument to a life that no longer existed. The criminal trial began in May. 4 days. Courtroom 6. Judge Marcus Chen presiding. I wore my best flannel shirt and pressed khakis. The same outfit I'd worn to every important meeting at Ford. The outfit Margaret used to lay out for me the night before. Reyes called me to the stand on the first morning. The evidence came out in the same methodical order I'd organized it. The journals with serial numbers, bank records with timestamps, storage access logs with appointment correlations, photographs of items sold at the garage sale, each one annotated with its documented value. The neuropsychological evaluation destroyed the dementia narrative Bradley and Kirsten had spent months constructing. 94th percentile, Reyes repeated for the jury. That means Mr. Whitmore's mental acuity exceeds 94% of people his age. The jury took notes. 12 faces. 12 strangers deciding my son's fate. Reyes introduced Margaret's evidence next. The bank statements from 2009. The forged signatures. The typed letter explaining what she'd discovered and why she'd chosen to document rather than expose. Mrs. Whitmore wrote this letter 15 years ago, Reyes said. She hid it in a secret compartment of her jewelry box, knowing that someday her husband might need it. He read the final paragraph aloud. He's done it before. He'll do it again. I love you, Harold. Trust your instincts. Someone in the gallery cried. I didn't look to see who. Former neighbors testified on the second day. 3 of them. Each one described conversations with Kirsten about my supposed dementia. The dates, the locations, the exact phrases she'd used. Dolores Finch was the strongest witness. 71 years old, sharp-tongued, and she'd kept meticulous records of every lie Kirsten had spread. She told me Harold couldn't remember what day it was, Dolores said. That was on September 14th, at the block party on Maple Street. She said it loud enough for 6 people to hear. The garage sale customer who'd bought the pearls testified next. A woman named Barbara Hendricks. She'd bought the pearl necklace for $20, then returned it after learning the truth. He called his own father senile, Barbara said, right in front of me. He said the necklace was costume jewelry. He was selling his dead mother's pearls for $20 while claiming his father had dementia. The jury's faces hardened. On the third day, Reyes introduced Cody's written statement. My grandson was 15 now. Too young to testify in person, the court had decided. But his words could still be read into the record. The statement quoted his parents directly. Get Grandpa into a home. Sell everything before the insurance deadline. The conversations about Shady Pines. The calculations about the house value. I heard my mom say the insurance wouldn't pay if Grandpa lived past the year, Cody had written. My dad said they needed to move fast. The 1-year survival clause. The jury understood now why Bradley had been so desperate. Why he'd escalated from small thefts to systematic fraud. He was racing a clock. His own mother's death had started the timer. Patricia Vance's defense was thin. She argued Bradley had intended to repay the money. She suggested the storage unit thefts were misunderstandings about a state organization. The jury didn't believe her. On the 4th day, they received the case at 2:15 p.m. 3 hours later, they returned. The foreman stood, a woman in her 50s with gray hair and reading glasses. On the charge of theft over $1,000 from a person over 65, how does the jury find? Guilty. Bradley's head dropped an inch. On the charge of elder financial exploitation, guilty. His attorney stopped writing. On the charge of fraud in the 1st degree, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. 4 charges. 4 guilty verdicts. The evidence I'd collected over months of careful documentation had done exactly what quality control documentation was supposed to do. It had identified the defect. It had proven the pattern. It had created accountability. Sentencing came a week later. Judge Chen reviewed the case file for a long moment before speaking. "Mr. Whitmore, you systematically exploited your father's trust over a period of 15 years. You stole from your parents while your mother was alive, and you continued stealing after her death. You spread lies about your father's mental capacity. You attempted to institutionalize him against his will. You planned to drain his assets before an insurance policy could pay out." Bradley stood at the defense table. His jumpsuit hung loose on his frame. He'd lost weight in county lockup. The betrayal of familial trust is among the most serious offenses this court can consider. You violated not only the law, but the most fundamental bonds of human relationship. Judge Chen set down the file. "I sentence you to 7 years in state prison. You will be eligible for parole consideration in 4 years." The deputies moved forward. Handcuffs clicked around Bradley's wrists. He turned as they led him toward the door. His eyes found me in the gallery. We looked at each other across the courtroom. My son, my only child, the boy I'd taught to ride a bicycle in our driveway. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to say. The asset recovery process continued through the summer. Amanda Zhao tracked down what she could. Between recovered items and court-ordered restitution, we got back most of it. Some of Margaret's antique furniture had ended up at an estate sale dealer in Livonia. We recovered 3 pieces. Family photographs turned up in Bradley's garage during the investigation search. Boxes of them shoved into a corner, forgotten in his rush to liquidate everything valuable. The pearl necklace was already safe. Barbara Hendricks had returned it the week after the garage sale, horrified to learn she'd bought stolen property. I'd placed it back in Margaret's jewelry box, in the velvet compartment where it had rested for 18 years. I calculated the total loss on a Tuesday evening in July. Sitting at my desk with the journal open, cross-referencing items recovered against items stolen. Approximately $40,000 in items sold beyond recovery, plus legal fees. The cost of learning the truth about my son. Margaret's life insurance paid out in August. $150,000. The policy Bradley had been racing to beat. Bradley had been right about one thing. The 1-year survival clause was real. If I'd died or been declared incompetent before August, the policy would have lapsed. He'd been racing that clock, and he'd lost. I deposited the insurance money in an educational trust for Cody. Amanda helped me set it up. The funds would be available when he turned 18. College, trade school, a future not poisoned by his father's choices. His father's failures wouldn't determine his future. The restraining order remained in place. I wouldn't see my son outside a prison visiting room for at least 4 years. Longer, if the parole board decided his rehabilitation wasn't sufficient. I found I had nothing to say to him anyway. September brought the final piece of closure. A letter from the Michigan State Bar Association confirming that Bradley's real estate license had been permanently revoked. He would never sell another house. The career he'd built on borrowed money and borrowed time was officially over. I filed the letter with the rest of the documentation, the evidence section, page after page of careful records that had transformed suspicion into conviction. The Timex on my wrist showed 4:47 p.m. September 14th. 1 year and 5 months since Margaret had died. 1 year since I'd started suspecting something was wrong. I wound the watch the way I'd wound it every evening for 23 years. The mechanism engaged with its familiar click. Some things kept their value. Some things endured. And some defects, once documented, could finally be contained. Before I continue, please like and give my revenge a score from 1 to 10. I want to hear your thoughts. That evening, I sat on my front porch, watching the sun drop behind the houses across the street. The same porch I'd sat on with Margaret for 40 years. The same view. but different now. Cody leaned against the railing beside me, a glass of lemonade in his hand. He'd grown 3 inches since moving in with me for summers and school breaks. Taller than I remembered his father being at that age. Kirsten hadn't fought the custody arrangement. Ohio had taken her back. The house had stopped echoing. Cody's backpack hung by the door. His sneakers tracked mud on the same floors I'd tracked mud on 60 years ago. "Grandpa," Cody said, "the engine light came on in Russell's car today. He wants me to look at it tomorrow. Check the gas cap first. 9 times out of 10, that's all it is." He wrote something in the small notebook he'd started carrying. My notebook. One of the blank moleskines I'd given him 2 months ago, along with instructions on how to keep records. What to document. Why it mattered. He'd filled 12 pages already. Oil change dates. Tire rotations. The serial number on the lawnmower I'd taught him to maintain last summer. Some lessons took root. Some didn't. But Cody was learning. Tomatoes crowded the south side of the house. Peppers. A row of sunflowers Cody had insisted on because he remembered his grandmother growing them when he was small. The sunflowers were taller than him now. Margaret would have laughed at that. I wound my Timex that evening, the way I wound it every evening. The mechanism engaged with its familiar click. 24 years of reliable service. 24 years of keeping time. Some mornings, I drove to Oakwood Cemetery before Cody woke up. The headstone was simple. Margaret's name. The dates. The phrase we'd chosen together years ago, when death seemed like something that happened to other people. Beloved wife and mother. I stood at her grave last Tuesday and told her about Cody's report card. Straight A's in math. A struggle in English, but improving. I told her about the garden, how the tomatoes were coming in faster than I could eat them, how I'd started giving bags of them to Dolores and Russell, and the woman at the hardware store who always remembered my name. "You were right about him," I said. The morning air was cool. The cemetery was empty, except for me and the groundskeeper on his riding mower, 3 sections away. But you gave me what I needed to protect what matters. The walk home took longer than it used to. My knees complained at every hill. But my posture stayed straight. 35 years on the factory floor had built habits that outlasted the body. Provenance Journal number 18 sat open on my desk when I got back. The new entries documented different things now. Items recovered. The educational trust established for Cody. A fishing rod Russell had given me for my birthday, its weight familiar in my hands when I tested the reel. The house would pass to someone eventually. The money would fund Cody's choices, but that wasn't the point. My legacy was a 16-year-old boy sitting on my porch, writing in a notebook, learning to tell the difference between what people say and what they mean. The sun dropped below the horizon. Cody closed his notebook and looked at me. "Same time tomorrow, Grandpa." Same time tomorrow. He went inside to wash up for dinner. I stayed on the porch a moment longer, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one down the block. Margaret's photograph waited on the mantel inside. 57 years old in that picture. Laughing, the way I wanted to remember her. I wound my watch one final click and went in to start dinner. The smell of pot roast would fill the kitchen soon enough.